Hey everybody, we're back with another edition of our Office Hours Hangout here live from the FutureStack conference. I'm Alan Bush from Rackspace.
I'm Drew from Rackspace.
And we have Abner Germano from New Relic here with us joining us. How you doing, Abner?
I'm fantastic.
Great. Well, it's great to have you joining us today. I know that the keynote ran just a little bit long and you were in there for that, and I know that there's a lot of exciting things in there. You're mentioning our CTO, John Engaze, kind of finished that up and some of the stuff he was talking about. But yeah, it's great to have you on here, and we hope to continue a conversation that we actually started last night. Tell us what we were talking about last night.
Sure. So the big thing we were talking about last night was essentially the shared responsibility that customers have when they're using cloud services. Mm-hmm. So if I have a digital experience, it might be a mobile app, it might be a website, it might be both. There are things that the cloud service provider provides, which mm-hmm. is the server and sort of IT infrastructure capacity, and that could range up and down the stack to be maybe a variety of different things. Could be power and pipe, could be things like AWS's Lambda service mm-hmm. and everything in between. Mm-hmm. And despite that, the customer is now responsible for everything else on mm-hmm. top of that, everything from the power and pipe up through the what the customer actually interacts with. And I should say there's the customer of the cloud service and the software teams that mm-hmm. deliver all of those experiences, and then there is the customer of that customer, right? And so the end user who's experiencing the e-commerce site, the mobile app. As a software team, I'm responsible for what that end service looks like. Right. And there's quite a bit that's packed into that. I might have to use multiple clouds. I mm-hmm. might have to figure out whether a problem is being driven by my code or if there's a hiccup in the cloud service provider. And so that shared responsibility model is something that a number of cloud providers have talked about in terms of security, but it ranges beyond just security. There's always a demarc point between mm-hmm. you and the cloud provider. And software teams need to be able to see across those demarc points in order to understand what's actually happening underneath the covers.
Right. Yeah, compliance is the easy default of that, but then once you get into the deeper recesses of the application, there's definitely more to talk about.
Yeah, and I think John did a great job in the keynotes talking about how you have to use data to understand what's happening, but also you test things and you try to iterate on every experience, and then listen to the data to figure out what you're going to do next, and that that ability to listen to the data is what we're talking about here at FutureStack. There are lots mm-hmm. of people talking about the data that they've listened to and the decisions that they've made around that.
Yeah, data-driven decision-making is the key right. behind, I think, insights and most of the product set that you guys have, and it's making sense of what you've got and knowing what else you can capture that becomes more and more interesting. And that's what I'm personally interested to hear more about, is how you gather all of this and then correlate it to make a better decision for your business. Yeah. So what kinds of things are you most excited about in the next couple of days?
So I've gotten to see all the presentations, or most of the presentations, before they've been given. So I'll tell you some of my favorites. So Nick Benders from New Relic is going to talk about how we've scaled our own infrastructure to collect all this data mm-hmm. and what that looks like, and how things break, and mm-hmm. and the realities of scaling something where every time you think you've built something for the biggest scale you can imagine, 9 months later you're trying to figure out why that thing doesn't work because you've blown all those numbers away. And so Nick's talk will be awesome. Dana Lawson has a presentation called "If It Touches Production, it is production."
Music to my ears.
And you think about, we used to think about the production server as production, but I think about everything from the HipChat or Slack collaboration tool, through all the continuous integration and testing tools and everything in that pipeline, that's all production. And if you think about how fast you loop through that cycle, that's all production now. And so that's an awesome talk. There's a guy, Robert Wyckoff from Coinbase, Coinbase is a Bitcoin bank and exchange, and so their software is money. And security is usually a huge deal for them. Yeah. And so even if you don't think of yourself as, I need to be secure, his presentation is, I think, very challenging around the notion that all of these services have to be secure. And so he's talking about the stack and the processes that they have gone through to build software that is money, and how to keep that environment secure. And so that talk is awesome. Maria from Target is going to talk about Target's mobile apps. And the thing that I think is awesome about that is it's not just the data for the dev team. They used to, if something went wrong with their app, they would rely on one of their team members in their stores to issue a ServiceNow ticket and say, hey, something wrong happened. And of course, nobody does that. Like, with all due respect,
there's a line. There's people that need stuff now in my face.
Right, and there's, all due respect to ServiceNow, like that's not the, that's not what they're looking for. And so they use New Relic Mobile to figure out what actually happened and what are the issues that people are having, and then they can go back to the team member and say, hey, it looks like you had this problem when somebody was trying to buy something, or in the registry app where you actually walk around the store with the customer. So that's a great one. Oh God, there are so many. So tomorrow morning I have a huge issue because there are two talks at the same time that I can't go to.
You haven't cracked that one yet.
Haven't cracked that one. Tomorrow morning, the keynote's awesome, but the Gene Kim is going to talk about sort of what he's learned about DevOps, and so that's going to be awesome. There's David Kent from US Foods, who I love David because he talks about the evolution of their e-commerce system, and he's sort of very I don't know quite how to describe it, but basically, he'll be talking about their e-commerce system and he'll say, and there's $18 billion flowing through it this year, and we're hoping to take that to 24, and your mind just goes, and this is for US Foods, which is a company that delivers all the food to all the restaurants and all sorts of places, and they had they were going to merge with Cisco, not the router company, the food company, and so they did a lot in their architecture to prepare for that merger, which ended up not happening, but they made some huge changes to prepare for it that now position them in wonderful ways, so they can now evolve their infrastructure in ways that they've never considered. And for US Foods to think of themselves as a software company is pretty awesome.
Well, it's definitely compelling to think about the value that can come from that, because it took a potential merger to get the ball rolling. But if you don't wait for a merger and you get the ball rolling when you're not under the gun of M&A situation, that can really keep you from being in the M&A situation. You can continue to capitalize and continue to grow, and that's fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, so I talked about how the US Foods was at the same time as another presentation. The CTO of School Messenger is, so School Messenger provides messaging services and communication services to 55,000 schools all over the US, and actually all over the world. And their cost structure is different in every school district because they can make a phone call, they can send an email, they can send a text message. And so the cost of running their business used to be in the head of a guy named Howard, because Howard ran the database. And so
he was the database.
He was no, he wasn't the database.
He was the
interface. He was the person. He was the person in the corner who ran the database. And so they've made this transition from, and the title of the presentation is From Howard's Head to Dashboards. And so they now can understand the cost of running their business in ways that they've never been able to. And by the way, the entire team can now see what those
Right.
cost structures look like. And it's not just Howard going, hey guys, I think we have a problem in Chicago. And so that team dynamic is fascinating. They're also in the midst of migrating to AWS, and so understanding the visibility and being able to figure out what's in their legacy data center versus their AWS deployment, huge deal.
Very, very cool.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing as many of those as we can.
Yes.
I don't know how many we're going to be able to break away and see. I mean, there is that.
And there's so
age-old
many more that I haven't even
Right.
done.
Yeah, that's
I mean, I could
taste.
sit here all day, and, but let's
just
not do
taste.
that.
Well, let's
Right.
talk about the conference itself, right? There are 3 different tracks, right? 3 or
Yeah.
4 different tracks that are going on, right?
Well, so let me talk about the reasoning behind the 3
Yeah.
tracks. So there is the technology that that the FutureStack consists of, and if you think about any software team, you have to make bets on various pieces of technology, and you make those bets at different times depending on what the business need is. So when you're small and you're just trying to prove product market fit, you're going to make a set of technology and stack decisions that serve that ability to move fast and iterate really fast. And as you scale, then all of a sudden scale and stability and security starts to become a bigger deal. And so that track was really designed to have those conversations of what's in your stack and how have you made those decisions. The second one, and that's the architecture track, the second track is really focused on the people and the processes of, okay, you have this stack, how do you get that team to work together? So in software we have this classic mythical man month problem where if you throw more developers at it, then you should get more. And we've always laughed at that, and that's always been a huge thing. But if you look at the data from the Puppet survey, what you find is that high-performance software companies actually can do that. They can throw more people at their overall service and get more out of it. And that's a kind of issue, but that's what we want to, but that's what people are struggling with, is how do you get more productivity? How do you get more when you add more people?
There's a book, I think it's 4-Hour Workweek or one of those,
Yes.
where it talks about you throw more people at a bad process and you get more bad, and you
Right.
throw more people at a good process
Right.
and you actually start getting that exponential value.
Right. So Ralph Bunner, who's one of our VPs of engineering, has a great talk on how we use GitHub to look at the processes that we have in our engineering organization. And the reason we use Git to enumerate the processes is because we're always in a state of change, and we always want people on the team to be able to say, hey, I think we should do something differently. And we've found that if we put that process on a wiki, people would join New Relic, look at the wiki, and go, well, I can't make a change. This is how it's done. That's the rule of the land. So that's awesome. Patrick Lightbody, and then we have the New Relic track, where we talk about sort of all things New Relic, and there's some great presentations there. One of my favorites is actually the very last presentation of the conference by one of our technical account managers, James Conway, who is balancing, it's got a use case for balancing browser data, which is real user data, which can be a little messy, and synthetic data, which is consistent control data.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that real user data that's coming in, when I see a problem, there's always a question of, well, is that a real problem? Or is that something just strange because people were on the train using our browser and app? And so he has this cool thing where he looks at basically determining whether a problem is a problem with a synthetic data, which is very consistent, and I can write any kind of test that I want, and then using insights to validate the fact that it is a problem, and then once you've fixed it, validate that you fixed it. And so it's an awesome art and science mix. And that art and science mix is amazing. If you think about, Lou's keynote this morning, he talks about how software is just this amazing creative process. And you mentioned the data-driven being data driven. And one of the things that we find is that it's okay to use your gut. It's okay to use your instinct. But I like to borrow from the security world, because I came out of that space, to this sort of trust but verify, right? You can trust your gut.
I'm a fan.
I'm
a fan.
But you want to verify that, and so you have hypotheses that something will do, will change the customer experience, or drive down your cost, or make something easier. But then you should test that and see if that actually was true. And the lean methodologies and Intuit's been a huge proponent of that world. And so when you combine DevOps, when you combine cloud and that speed of iteration, then you can get into a world where you can have these hypotheses and verify them.
Yeah, and without verifying, it's a hunch.
Right. And so a whole bunch of people talking about how they verify and test in various places.
And I like to hear about it. That's the gamble of most decisions frustrates me deeply because there's never a next step. It's just a gamble.
Well, and it should. And the way that we used to create software was, some HIPPO. You know what a HIPPO is?
Like a high potential...
Highest paid person's opinion.
Okay.
So you'd have the HIPPO's opinion, and that's what we did. And so, but you look at companies like Intuit, where I think he was the CTO, and we could look it up, but essentially they said, hey, I have great opinions, but you shouldn't listen to me. You should test everything that we do. And so they actually run tons of tests during tax season. Because that's when all their customers are using their stuff, right? And so, I love that example, and there are many more like it.
That's why cardiac doctors use stress tests. Get on that treadmill, and we're going to watch.
Right. And so that's something that hasn't been, that's a best practice in high-performing software teams, but there are many teams that are just getting to that. And so there are lots of them talking this week.
Might as well take the lessons learned from the people who've done it before and stumble over those roadblocks yourself.
Right.
Very cool. Well, there's going to be quite a bit of great content generated, and we really appreciate the time you've given us this morning, and we'll have to set up some time to hang out a little bit later on, maybe early next year.
Sounds good.
And we'll do some more of this.
Sounds awesome. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing what you do. This is a great show.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to have you on. And so we're Drew and I are going to be live more throughout this whole process, right? So check back in at live.ohpodcast.com. Check out Twitter for the hashtag FutureStack15. That's the entire conference is going by. Right now, I think that there's a conference. There's a talk on. We have a talk on Docker going on right now as well, right? So
awesome
lots of interesting stuff on that. We'll definitely want to talk about that probably next year. We can talk about, let everybody rest a little bit after FutureStack here. But last night we were chatting, and you mentioned there were some other people that you wanted to bring into the conversation as well. So
we'll get them
in there. But so lots of great stuff. So keep watching. We're going to have several different shows we do live. So we will be live again. So thanks everybody, and see you later.